the Los Angeles Dodgers clubhouse has just experienced the most explosive and most damaging internal crisis of the entire season. Manager Dave Roberts did something today that nobody in that organization had seen coming with the speed and the severity it arrived with. He reprimanded Cole publicly for using up all of his ABS challenges, and then demoted him to the minor leagues immediately. That is two significant organizational actions directed at the same player in the same moment, and the message embedded in that combination could not have been clearer to everyone in that clubhouse who witnessed it. But what followed Roberts' decision was something that elevated this situation from a significant roster management story into a full-scale organizational crisis. Chaos erupted. Rushing and Sasaki got into a brawl that reportedly took multiple people to break up. And then Cole, the player who had just been reprimanded and demoted, the player who was already in the worst professional moment of his season, turned around and hurled verbal abuse directly at Shohei Ohtani. At Ohtani, the greatest player in baseball. The man who is the foundation of everything the Los Angeles Dodgers are trying to accomplish this season. Cole chose that man as the target of his anger in the most chaotic and most emotionally volatile moment of this entire clubhouse saga. And the baseball world is now watching very carefully to see how this organization responds to everything that happened today. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that Roberts had not only reprimanded Cole for the ABS challenge situation but had immediately followed that reprimand with a demotion to the minor leagues? The ABS challenge issue is the starting point for understanding everything that followed. Automatic ball strike challenges are one of the most valuable and most limited tactical resources available to a team during a game. Each team receives a specific number of challenges, and the decision about when to deploy those challenges requires careful judgment about which calls are most likely to be successfully overturned and which moments in the game matter most competitively. Using up all of those challenges in a way that Roberts found worthy of public reprimand tells you that Cole's decision-making in that situation fell significantly below the standard that this organization expects from its players in the management of competitive resources. The reprimand itself would have been significant. The immediate demotion that followed transformed it into something that could not be interpreted by anyone in that clubhouse as anything other than a clear and unambiguous organizational statement. Let's examine the demotion in the specific context of where this team is in the season, and what Cole's absence means for a Dodgers roster that has been dealing with rotation and roster depth questions throughout the year. A demotion at this stage of a competitive season is never a purely punitive decision, even when it follows immediately from a disciplinary situation. It is also a competitive decision that the organization has to live with in terms of the roster implications it creates. Roberts and the front office made the judgment that whatever Cole was providing to this team on the field was outweighed by the combination of his performance level and his conduct in the ABS challenge situation. That is a judgment that reflects an organizational standard that applies to every player on this roster regardless of experience or previous contributions. The standard exists, and when it is not met, the consequences are real. From a clubhouse perspective, what was the atmosphere inside that room in the immediate aftermath of Roberts' reprimand and demotion of Cole, and how did that atmosphere connect to the brawl that erupted between Rushing and Sasaki? This is the crucial link in the chain of events that turned a disciplinary story into a full-scale organizational crisis. When a teammate is publicly reprimanded and immediately demoted, it sends an electric current through the entire clubhouse. Everyone feels it. Everyone processes it differently based on their own relationship with the player who was disciplined, their own sense of whether the punishment fit the situation, and their own accumulated emotional state coming into that moment from everything else that has been happening inside this team. The brawl between Rushing and Sasaki did not emerge from nothing. It emerged from a room that was already charged with tension and stress and competitive frustration before Roberts ever walked in to deliver his reprimand. The demotion was the match that ignited what was already a very full room of fuel. Now let's address the Rushing and Sasaki brawl directly, because this is the second major story within today's larger story, and it deserves careful examination on its own terms. Rushing and Sasaki have had documented friction inside this clubhouse throughout the season. The specific tensions between them have been discussed and acknowledged at various points as something the coaching staff was managing. What happened today tells you that whatever management was being applied to that friction was not sufficient to prevent it from breaking through in the most explosive possible way when the emotional temperature of the clubhouse reached the level it reached after Roberts' disciplinary actions against Cole. A brawl that requires multiple people to separate is not a minor confrontation. It is an indication that something genuine and something serious was expressed physically between two players whose relationship had deteriorated to a point where normal competitive friction became unmanageable under pressure. The most alarming element of everything that happened today, the element that has the entire baseball world genuinely concerned about the internal health of this organization, is what Cole did after his reprimand and demotion. He directed verbal abuse at Ohtani. Let that sit for a moment. A player who has just been publicly reprimanded and demoted to the minor leagues by his manager chose the greatest player in baseball as the target of the anger that followed. The choice of target is what makes this incident so revealing about the psychological state Cole was in during those moments. Because directing verbal abuse at Ohtani is not just a violation of the professional standards of this clubhouse. It is an act that carries specific meaning given who Ohtani is and what he represents to this organization and to the sport. Ohtani has never given Cole or anyone else in that clubhouse a reason to direct that kind of hostility toward him. He has been nothing but a professional and a leader and a competitor every single day of the season. What does Cole's decision to direct verbal abuse at Ohtani tell us about the state of mind he was in following the reprimand and the demotion, and about the broader culture questions this incident raises for the Dodgers organization? When a player lashes out verbally at a teammate under extreme pressure, the direction of that lashing out is rarely random. It reflects something that has been building. Whether Cole had accumulated resentments about Ohtani's position in this organization, about the attention Ohtani receives, about the expectations that surround Ohtani's presence in this clubhouse, or about something more specific that exists in the private dynamic between these two players, whatever the origin of that verbal attack, it reveals a level of internal tension inside this roster that the organization cannot afford to leave unaddressed. How did Ohtani respond when Cole directed verbal abuse at him in the middle of this chaotic situation? This is the question that everyone in that clubhouse and everyone in the baseball world is asking right now. Because how Ohtani responds to this kind of direct personal attack in this kind of high-pressure organizational moment will tell us something important about who he is as a leader and about his capacity to maintain his competitive focus through adversity of a genuinely personal nature. The details of his response, what he said, what he did, how he carried himself in the minutes and hours following Cole's verbal attack, are something the baseball world is waiting to learn. Based on everything we know about Ohtani's character and his track record of responding to difficult situations with composure and dignity, the reasonable expectation is that he handled it in a way that reflected the same extraordinary professionalism he brings to every other aspect of his presence in this organization. Roberts made his decision. Cole was demoted. The brawl happened. The verbal abuse was directed at Ohtani. And the Los Angeles Dodgers organization is now facing questions about its internal culture and its competitive cohesion at exactly the moment in the season when unity and focus are most essential for a team with championship ambitions. How this organization responds to everything that happened today will define the next chapter of this season's story. And every player in that clubhouse knows it.